Hello, welcome to Tricky Conversations Unfiltered with myself, Liz Walker, and Jenny Hoey of Youth Wellbeing Project. We're really glad to be back. We took a little bit of a break. It's really important to have some self-care, and I don't know about our listeners, but we're certainly experiencing a fuller than usual year, and I know there's been a lot of stresses for a lot of people, so that we hope that you're well. Tonight we really want to talk about the science around pornography, the research around pornography, and just actually what's happening with the porn. I fondly use that term loosely, call them porn harms science deniers. And we have an increasing number of people who are listening to researchers who are essentially very much allies of the porn industry. And so it can get quite tricky, quite murky in this area when you're speaking up about the harms of pornography. Now, we're going to come back and talk about the sorts of vitriol and hate speech and lies and defamation that's been spoken about me. It's been spoken about my colleagues. For one colleague in particular, it's been a long, ongoing battle. So I want to come back to that conversation because I think it's really important that people realize how much you really put yourself on the line when you start making inroads in this area. You know, there's a lot of people that are starting to, have been targeting, not just starting to, but have been relentlessly targeting those of us who have been speaking up about the harms of porn. So we'll come back to that. But what we wanted to talk about tonight is the research. And, you know, many people are saying that pornography is a public health crisis. And the naysayers will say that there's not enough research. And that's simply not true. What we need to consider is the micro and the macro. So when we look at the individual person, when we look at how an individual interacts with pornography, of course, not every young person, not every child is going to be harmed, or certainly not harmed in the same way. What we do know about the research is that the younger kids are, when they see pornography, that can have some profoundly long-term impacts if they don't have an opportunity to nip that in the bud and speak about it straight away or not watch it repeatedly. So kids who see pornography earlier are far more likely to get addicted to it. Then we've also got to think about the macro issue, and the macro is how it's impacting the broader levels of society and all of the different areas. So we're talking about not just how the individual interacts with the content in their relationships, but how everybody is dealing with it on a macro level and how it's feeding into other forms of exploitation. And that's a much bigger conversation that we will come back again and again, because essentially what the research, I've been spending a lot of time diving into the papers lately, and what the research seems to say is that when a couple are both using pornography in their relationship freely and willingly, that there seems to be no implications or no hassles for that. Then if it's one person using it out of that couple, and the other person isn't, and it's been hidden, or you know that the other person's not happy about it, can cause intense relational difficulties. But that's only, again, looking at the micro. And when we look at the macro, there's so many other implications that we need to think about. So we can't cover it all in one live. I'm going to bring Jenny into the conversation after we watch this video that Gabe Deem has put in, because Gabe Deem is one of our advisors for Youth Wellbeing Project. He's been spending a lot of time speaking up about this, and he's a great advocate. He started watching porn when he was a kid, got addicted. He didn't have a problem per se with watching porn. He was quite okay with it. He's experienced no shame from watching porn. And he was very sexually confident. He was sexually confident with his girlfriends throughout high school. and had been sexually active for quite some time. Then when he hit 23 and he was with a girl that he really liked, he suddenly discovered that he had porn-induced erectile dysfunction from years of conditioning his brain to watch pornography. So I'm going to share the screen, and we're going to take a look at what Gabe has done. He's basically talking about this huge divide right now on the research and the types of tactics that the porn industry are using to essentially disinform the public. Okay. Porn industry and allies, I should say. Let's have a look at this.
In view of the continuing and mounting evidence from many sources, it is a judgment of the committee that cigarette smoking contributes substantially to mortality from certain specific diseases and to the overall death rate.
That was Dr. Luther Terry, the Surgeon General, opening the report of his advisory committee on smoking and health. The committee was set up to look over the whole smoking situation and to tell the government and the nation what can reasonably be said to be fact. After a year and 2 months, they did so. Their conclusions were firm and unanimous. The Surgeon General's committee was appointed as a culmination of a long series of attacks on smoking. In the 1930s, doctors began getting worried about the increase in lung cancer rates. In the early 1950s, the first extensive statistical studies showing a relationship between cigarette smoking and lung cancer appeared, and new studies have appeared periodically since.
In December 1953, the CEOs of the major tobacco companies met secretly in New York City. Their purpose was to counter the damage from studies linking smoking to lung cancer. In 1954, the tobacco industry paid to publish the frank statement to cigarette smokers in hundreds of U.S. newspapers. It stated that the public's health was the industry's concern above all others and promised a variety of good faith changes. What followed were decades of deceit and actions that cost millions of lives. Big Tobacco came up with a strategy that is now known as the Tobacco Playbook. Essentially, they denied the science that showed cigarettes were causing various diseases and denied that it was addictive, attacked and defamed those who raised awareness, and partnered with agenda-driven doctors and scientists to promote their product as beneficial, and cast doubt on the growing health concern among consumers. Today, there's another battle for truth raging on while millions of people are developing addiction and sexual dysfunctions, while a billion-dollar industry and their partners push back with denial, disinformation, and defamation of those raising awareness.
And there's something called porn-related erectile dysfunction, which is a relatively new phenomenon. And that is basically someone can only be aroused through pornography and not through actual relationships? Is that what that is?
Yes. And you know, when we first start out, you know, some of these people who are watching porn, it may be as a supplement, but over time it takes over where the person can no longer feel aroused by their partner, so that they want sex in a certain way. If it's masturbation, only they can understand the touch and the pleasure. And it's also very high speed internet access, so that you're getting instant gratification in a way that your pleasure, in a way that your partner cannot arouse you anymore.
Gabe Deem from Irving, Texas is here, and he says he has actually experienced this. And Gabe, tell us what happened to you.
Well, my story is a lot different than Craig's, right? I'm what you would consider an opportunity addict, and I'm the first generation that had access to high-speed internet porn, as Sue just said. And I was exposed like Craig at the age of 8, but I didn't have any trauma or abuse that led me to use pornography.
You were just curious?
Yeah, I mean, I was just a boy. Of course I'm gonna like looking at naked girls. Then at the age of 12, I got high-speed internet. And it wasn't an issue that led me to watch porn. It was just that I liked it and I wanted to. And over time, you know, I became sexually active when I was 14. And so I was having sex and watching porn all through high school and into college. And eventually, I lost my motivation and drive for life, but that didn't catch my attention. What caught my attention was it became harder for me to get aroused by girls in real life.
So how did you change that? Or did you?
Well, I did what anyone would do. I was 23 and healthy and had no idea what was wrong with me. So I went to Google and I typed in, you know, young guy problem. And
Why do I suddenly feel like Dr.
I mean,
Ruth?
what else
But
are you
go
gonna
ahead.
type, right? So I found forums, right, where hundreds of thousands of guys my age, teenagers, are talking about having erectile dysfunction. And they all had one thing in common: years of internet porn use. And the key is internet, because it's novel. You can always click to something more shocking, and it overstimulates our brain. So I saw just to give up porn, you can regain sexual function. So as a young man that didn't have a penis that worked, that was pretty strong motivation.
Wow.
So
is everything A-okay in this department?
Yes. Yeah, it took me 9 months to recover. So it was clear that something was happening in my brain, and I really had some deep conditioning for pornography.
Wow, that's so interesting.
This is really important. There is not a shred of scientific evidence that links erectile dysfunction with pornography use. In most of the studies that are being published, it has to do with smoking, drug use, health, stress, relationship, and anxiety. One of the questions that a lot of people worry about, and we got asked these questions during the survey, is pornography addictive? Does it change my brain to sit and watch pornography? The easy and quick answer that I'll tell you is that there is absolutely no evidence that pornography is addictive.
Use the medical community, the scientific community, on whether there is such a thing as quote-unquote sex addiction.
There's a pretty big split in the community. That is, most neuroscientists and people who study these conditions tend not to believe that it's an addiction, that it's not consistent with that, but a lot of the treatment providers who do counseling think that it is an addiction.
So about 11 years ago, men started showing up on my wife's forum. Her forum had nothing to do with internet porn, porn addiction, or porn problems, and they were complaining that porn was causing sexual dysfunction. We're not sure why they showed up, but her website was about the neurobiology of sexual relationships. It had articles about neurobiology of love, sex, bonding, and maybe Google put together certain key words like ejaculation, dopamine, addiction, and they showed up and they started helping each other. Google must have archived their posts because more and more showed up. And to our amazement and theirs, when they quit porn, these dysfunctions healed. Chronic erectile dysfunction, inability to orgasm, declining interest in real partners, escalation to porn that did not match their original sexual taste. Now, we published articles about the men's experience, and soon my wife's forum was flooded with men. Many of these young men, sadly, with porn-induced ED, were suicidal. They thought they were ruined for life. Over and over, the men asked this question: why didn't anyone tell me that porn use could cause erectile dysfunction?
Doctors in every branch of medicine were asked, "What cigarette do you smoke, doctor?" In this nationwide survey of general practitioners, surgeons, throat specialists, diagnosticians, and so on, the brand named most was Camel. Yes, according to this survey, more doctors smoke Camels than any other cigarette. Try Camels yourself. Make the one sensible cigarette test. Make your own 30-day Camel mildness test in your T-zone. Smoke only Camels for 30 days. Enjoy Camel's rich, full flavor. And see how well Camels agree with your throat. Pack after pack, week after week. See for yourself why Camels are so popular with the doctors of America.
Okay, so that's the porn industry. Now, Gary Wilson, we heard him speak there at a conference. He has been under intense attack for 7 years. He's an absolute legend. And if you go to his site, yourbrainonporn.com, you will find ample evidence of addiction. And we haven't even got into the issues around violence against women and girls. And we'll come back to that at another stage, but and then also on our own website, I've updated today some of the most compelling research articles for people to access, and many of those are available not behind paywalls. So, Jenny, tell me, this deny, defame, attack playbook that they're using, tell me how that makes you feel.
First of all, it doesn't surprise me. This is an industry, after all, that profits from child exploitation, trafficking, rape, violence. I would almost be surprised if they weren't lying. So I not for a single moment believe what they're saying. It is there are so many children, and I'm really coming from position as a mother with a young child of 7 and a daughter of 16 and a son of 18. And to say that pornography is not addictive is ludicrous. And as you all know, there is evidence out there. So they're hiding behind some thin veil of science, which is well, I say once again, ludicrous. But as a parent, I'm left having to work out how to navigate this ship. One of the things, I mean, if you're going to compare it to tobacco, for example, which Gabe has done, the first significant scientific report that linked the harms of tobacco to our health was in the 50s. Now, although I'm not proud to say it, I was working for a tobacco company in Switzerland in the 90s, and they were still making a huge amount of money. But my daughter of 16 absolutely opposes smoking. So there's been some education in schooling which has led her to come to that conclusion. There's no education on pornography in schools. There's no, there are not a lot of parents who feel comfortable talking so openly about it. In our home, we are pro-sex. We are anti-porn. If you look at Pornhub, you will understand why those two cannot ever be in the same category. And so the way I've had to move forward as a parent is to educate my kids. So my older kids, we have open conversations. My little boy of 7 knows how babies are made, knows all the right body parts. And I've gone as far as to tell him that there is something on the internet called porn, which is grown-ups, and we both know not always grown-ups, doing really horrible things to each other that can be confusing or upsetting. I know I can't prevent him from being exposed to it one day. What I'm wanting is him to have some ability as he gets older to think critically about what he is exposed to when he is exposed to it. And that's all I can do. I don't have the luxury of time to wait for the world to catch up with the evidence, which is in front of us, really, despite what they say. So I have to take matters into my own hands.
Yeah. And this is the thing, you know, it's just so profoundly difficult to get this message out while you've got, like, you know, every time in the media, you know, the media like to get a for and against side and play the sides off against one another. Well, they keep on regurgitating Dr. Nicole Prowse and Dr. David Lay. Now, you know, I will come back to them and the types of harassing, attacking comments that they've been doing against myself and others. But, you know, essentially they are very close allies with the porn industry. I mean, David Lay is paid by the porn industry to run these forums and you know, tell guys that it's not addictive and, you know, you just have a high libido and, you know, if you've got a problem with porn and you think that you're just really dealing with shame and that's what's causing your erectile dysfunction. I mean, the lies and the spin is just quite astounding.
Can I just say it's very interesting that they say shame, because no one can be made to feel anything, and shame is an emotion. So if someone is feeling shame, well, that's obviously, they're actually almost, what's the word? Well, they're kind of almost proving our point, aren't they? It is shameful. It is terrible what you see when you go on Pornhub. And I think that I like to believe people are intelligent. Anybody who shouts that loudly and fights in such an ugly way, in my opinion, are defensive. And when you're defensive, you're usually guilty.
Yeah. Yeah. And, you know, this is the challenging part about education in schools when we go into schools, because the last thing that we want to do is make a young person feel ashamed of their pornography use. And one of the things that we do and we recommend to do is to place the blame fairly and squarely where it belongs, and that's on the porn industry. Like, you know, you as young people, if you're watching porn, this is not your fault. No. Like when I grew up, it was in a magazine and, you know, you stumbled across it, but you couldn't have endless access online. But the porn industry has made it so accessible to you. if you are struggling with porn and struggling with porn addiction, it's no surprise to us.
No.
And, we don't want you to feel shame in any way about that when we're talking to you, but we do need you to understand the types of things that you can expect if you keep on looking at porn. And we do ask that you think about the types of things that porn consumption leads to, not just personally, but as a society. Like, where are we headed as a society? It's pretty damn ugly at the moment. There's a serious lack of empathy. I do notice that Safe for Kids, Holly Ann Martin, who is an absolute hero in our book, but she was at she says here she was training and spoke to a lady who works at the Women's Refuge, who spoke about all the women talking about choking in their relationships. So we've got women going into domestic violence shelters or calling hotlines, and they're being choked. And, if you're a 15-year-old or a 17-year-old and you've only ever known the world of porn, of course you're going to think that that's normal if nobody has had a conversation with you about what happy, healthy sex looks like. And that's what we want. We want our young people to be empowered to make decisions, to have happy, healthy sex, and porn isn't it.
Definitely not. And the porn industry is well aware of the fact that this is the first generation that has porn in their pocket, basically, in the form of mobile phones and fast internet. And they are doing their very best to groom these children from a younger and younger age. And that makes me beyond livid. My little boy has the right to have a childhood, and that's what I will fight for as long as it takes me.
I know, and me too. And it's a hard slog. This topic is a hard slog. People don't want to listen, for a number of reasons. It's too confronting. It's just too much. I can't deal with this. I don't want to think about it. What, you mean children see porn? Yeah, go Google boobs and see what comes up. Like, they can be innocently searching for something and be exposed to some of the most graphic content known to mankind. And I mean, the industry, as you say, they know it's addictive. That's why they're fighting so hard to prove it's not. But a normal, sane person who is aware of, who's got a friend or a partner or somebody who's struggled with porn, knows that that's an insane argument. And yet they've done so well to try and cover up the research. So I do encourage you, go to Youth Wellbeing Project and have a look at the addiction tab. I've just updated it today with a whole bunch of studies that you can have a look at and see the science for yourself. The ICD-11, there's always this throwaway line, the DSM-5 doesn't recognize porn addiction. Now, let me tell you, when DSM-5 was in draft form, the pro-porn allies were relentless in preventing that from getting into the DSM-5. Now, they tried the same again with the ICD-11, and they were unsuccessful. It ended up in the ICD-11. It's not that they call it compulsive sexual behavior disorder. And about the first 6 or 7 or maybe even 8 articles on my site, you will see that they all identify pornography within the compulsive sexual behavior disorder section. So then the other thing that they'll say is, addiction isn't a term. Well, tell that to the researchers, because just about all the research papers that come out that talk about compulsive sexual behavior disorder use the term addiction. So the researchers, the top scientists of the world, the ones that aren't paid and influenced by the porn industry, are calling it addiction. The ICD-11, it's a diagnosable condition, and under a certain set of parameters. That's on my site as well, so have a look at that. But it's really high time that we start getting the right information out, because our kids' brains, our kids' future sex lives are very much in jeopardy because of this disinformation of the porn sites and the fact that they have such easy, ready access. So, I mean, we desperately need age verification in Australia. Through my work with eChildhood when I was with them, and they're still pushing for that. We got a really good submission into the Australian government. There were 6 recommendations made by a committee on to implement age verification, and that was handed down in March, and then of course, or February or March, and then of course COVID hit. So nothing's been done with that. So if you're listening to this and you're in Australia, I really encourage you to ask your MP what's happened with this report. It was called Protecting the Age of Innocence, because right now our kids don't have that opportunity.
And I think what was important, because I was at the Aware conference last year and heard Gabe talk, and I think one of the things he says, which is really significant, is that he didn't come from a background of trauma. There was no shame attached to it. And yet look at where he was at 23. And that is what's happening to many, many, many of our children, our teenagers today. And that's really sad, because it's a lonely place to be when something goes wrong with your body and you may not understand why. You may not. Gabe has been extraordinary in his efforts to bring it to actually make public his own struggle and to try to help others. But the fact that he wasn't hiding behind a shame, and the fact that he actually said, look, this is what we did, is something we do need to take note of.
Yeah, because, you know, the young people in your world, if they're watching porn, their attitudes are being shaped by it, their behaviors are being shaped by it, their expectations are being shaped by it. You know, online sexual harassment in the playground at schools, you know, it's rife. Teachers experiencing harassment from students who just have zero respect for women. And it's all coming, it's being driven by the porn industry. So, you know, I really encourage you, please share this video. Please reach out if you need help and support. We've got educational programs. We've got, we visit schools. You know, we will not be silent on this. You know, I'm copying the most intense harassment right now on Twitter. It's crazy. But I just have to say, you know what? I'm doing something right. I'm doing something right. The porn industry hates me. That's okay. I'm just going to keep on going, because essentially the more people that speak up, the more that parents speak up, the more that teachers really push for this education in schools, the more that we have a chance at helping our kids. And I really also encourage you to push for age verification, because, I mean, I think one of my biggest concerns, and one of the reasons why I'm so passionate about seeing age verification come to pass, is that I just think we're going to take too long to catch up with education. It's taking too long to raise that awareness. It's taking too long for governments to do something. It's taking too long for schools. I mean, schools don't even, I know at least in New South Wales state schools, for instance, schools won't even let year 12s write an assignment on the impact of porn. Like, seriously, are you kidding me?
Exactly.
So without age verification, and I've just put a new graphic up that I've designed and released just this last week to explain what age verification is and has the potential to do for children and young people. So I just really encourage you to access that graphic and get informed about the research. And we'll circle back to a number of things that we've raised. It's been a longer than usual live update because we really wanted to give this weight, but we will be back with more on this. Okay, so Jenny, did you have anything that you wanted to add?
No, I think we've covered it. I just I would just encourage parents to put aside their own awkwardness. You'd be surprised how open children are when you just talk in a very matter-of-fact manner, and they do need to hear it from us. Yeah,
that's awesome. So we hope that this Tricky Conversations Unfiltered has helped you, parents and schools, community. We really look forward to seeing you again, and help us really get the word out. Okay. Talk soon.
Bye.
If you're concerned about children and young people's safety and well-being related to porn harms, find answers with Youth Wellbeing Project. Families searching for answers will benefit from our children's books, blogs, Facebook community, and other resources. The IQ programs provide classroom curriculum to equip educators for the task of supporting kids and teens to author their own future, instead of leaving it up to the porn industry to be their educator. Whether you need face-to-face or online professional training and student presentations, classroom curriculum or resources for families to deal with the fallout of porn, our team are here and educating for tricky conversations.